Have you ever wondered, what if no one could tell a lie anymore? Like, suddenly tomorrow morning, everyone on Earth becomes physically unable to say anything that isn't true? What would happen to society? Buckle up, because this scenario would fundamentally reshape human civilization in ways that would make the fall of Rome look like a minor inconvenience. We're talking about the complete collapse of social norms, economic systems, and probably most of your friendships. Let's start with something simple. You wake up tomorrow morning, and your partner asks how they look in their new outfit. Normally, you might say, great. Even if you're thinking it makes our new, truth-only world, you'd be them look like a deflated balloon animal, but enforced to say exactly what's on your mind. Within the first hour of this phenomenon, divorce lawyers would be overwhelmed with business, assuming they could still practice law without being able to engage in legal maneuvering. But personal relationships are just the tip of the iceberg. The entire foundation of human social interaction would crumble faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. You see, research shows that adults lie in roughly 20% of their everyday social interactions, and most of these are what psychologists call prosocial lies. These are the little white lies we tell to spare people's feelings, avoid conflict, and keep society functioning smoothly. Imagine walking into work on day one of our truth apocalypse. Your boss asks, "How along nicely?" You. The project is going. Instead of saying coming be forced to admit, "I haven't started it because I spent 3 hours yesterday watching videos of cats being afraid of cucumbers," your coworker asks if you want to grab lunch, and instead of making up an excuse, you'd have to say, "No, because I find your stories about your weekend pottery class mind-numbingly boring." The business world would experience something approaching total economic collapse. Negotiations, which form the backbone of commerce, rely heavily on strategic information sharing and, yes, occasional deception. When a car salesman can no longer tell you this is the best deal you'll find anywhere, or that another customer is coming to look at the same car this afternoon, the entire sales process breaks down. Companies couldn't engage in the competitive posturing that drives market dynamics. But here's where things get really interesting. The stock market would either become incredibly volatile or surprisingly stable, depending on how you look at it. On one hand, CEOs could no longer make optimistic projections they don't believe in, or downplay problems to maintain share prices. Every earnings call would become a brutally honest assessment of company prospects. Investors would finally know exactly what they're buying into, but the psychological impact of this sudden transparency might cause mass panic selling as people realize how much uncertainty actually exists in business. Financial markets rely on what economists call information asymmetries. When everyone has access to the same truth, concept of insider trading becomes meaningless when strategies collapse. The entire full information, traditional investment, everyone with inside information is compelled to share it publicly. Meanwhile, the advertising industry would face extinction overnight. No more claims that this toothpaste will make you irresistibly attractive, or that this energy drink will help you achieve your dreams. Advertisers would be forced to say things like, "This sugary beverage will give you a brief energy spike followed by a crash, and might contribute to diabetes if consumed regularly." Customer service representatives would become the most stressed workers on the planet. Instead of saying, "Your call is important to us," they'd have to admit, "We don't really care about your individual problem. We just want to process you as quickly as possible so we can go home." Even children's development would be fundamentally altered. Parents regularly engage in what researchers call prosocial deception with their kids. No more Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, or Tooth Fairy. When little Timmy shows you his crayon masterpiece that looks like abstract expressionism gone wrong, you couldn't say, "That's beautiful, sweetie." Instead, you'd be compelled to say something like, "That's a confused mess of colors that barely resembles anything recognizable." Child psychologists would have a field day studying the effects of this brutal honesty on developing minds. The education system would undergo a complete transformation. Teachers couldn't tell struggling students they're doing great when they're not, potentially crushing motivation and self-esteem. But on the flip side, grade inflation would disappear overnight. Students would know exactly where they stand academically, which might actually improve learning outcomes in the long run. Politics would become the most entertaining spectacle on Earth. Campaign promises would have to be achievable commitments rather than feel-good rhetoric. Politicians couldn't claim they care about the middle class while accepting donations from corporations that exploit workers. Debate moderators would have the easiest job in the world, because every answer would be genuine. Though honestly, most politicians would probably spontaneously combust from the cognitive dissonance. Dating apps would become hilariously honest. Profile descriptions would read things like, "I'm emotionally unavailable and looking for someone to validate my insecurities," or "I live in my parents' basement and my only hobby is arguing with strangers online." Speed dating events would last about 30 seconds per interaction. Law enforcement would face an identity crisis. The good cop, bad cop routine would be impossible when the bad cop has Miranda rights would need updating. You have the right to remain silent to manipulate you into confessing, to admit he's just trying, because if you speak, you'll tell us exactly what happened whether you want to or not. The legal system itself would collapse and rebuild simultaneously. Plea bargaining becomes meaningless when defendants can't claim innocence if they're guilty. But criminal investigations would become infinitely easier. No more false alibis, no more lying witnesses, no more perjury charges. Judges could simply ask, "Did you commit this crime?" and get a straight answer. Mental health professionals would see their practices evolve dramatically. Therapy sessions would become incredibly efficient when patients can't minimize their problems or lie about their behaviors. But therapists would also lose their ability to provide gentle, encouraging feedback when clients need emotional support. International diplomacy would enter uncharted territory. Treaties and negotiations rely on strategic ambiguity and face-saving measures. When world leaders can't engage in diplomatic doublespeak or make commitments they don't intend to keep, global relations would either become remarkably straightforward or descend into chaos as countries are forced to admit their true intentions. Religious institutions would face perhaps the greatest challenge of all. Faith leaders couldn't make claims about divine knowledge they don't actually possess, or promise rewards in an afterlife they can't guarantee. The entire structure of organized religion would need to adapt to a world where spiritual certainty can't be manufactured through persuasive rhetoric. Within months, society would begin adapting to this new reality. People would develop incredibly thick skin out of necessity. Social norms would shift toward radical acceptance of harsh truths. But here's what might surprise you about the long-term consequences. After the initial chaos settled, humanity might actually emerge stronger from this forced honesty experiment. Trust, which forms the foundation of all human cooperation, would be rebuilt on an unshakable bedrock of truth. Economic transactions would become more efficient when everyone knew exactly what they were getting. Relationships, though fewer in number, would be deeper and more authentic. Children might grow up more resilient, having never been cushioned by false praise, but also never doubting genuine compliments. The irony is that in losing our ability to lie, we might discover something profound about human nature. Perhaps our capacity for deception isn't just a character flaw to be overcome, but a complex social tool that evolved for good reasons. Those prosocial lies we tell aren't just about avoiding awkwardness. They're about building the social bonds that hold civilization together. So while a world without lies might sound appealing when you're frustrated with politicians or used car salesmen, remember that the next time someone tells you your haircut looks great, they might just be participating in the small acts of kindness that make society possible. Sometimes, a little bit of strategic truth stretching is exactly what keeps us all from descending into beautiful, honest, but ultimately lonely chaos. Thanks for watching, and remember, everything I just told you is absolutely true.